Australia's unemployment rate has remained steady in the month of March at 3.5%. To look more at the broader state of the economy a month out from the budget and whether today's numbers could spark another rate rise, I spoke a short time ago with Professor Stephen Hamilton from George Washington University.
They said they held last meeting to wait and see. I'm sort of critical of that decision. I think the interest rates are way below where they are in other countries, way below where they need to be in order to bring inflation down in a reasonable time frame. And today we see, very strong job market continues. So despite the big run up in interest rates to date, it's basically had no effect whatsoever on the labour market. We have unemployment at 3.5%, which is the lowest level in 50 years. Job numbers that far exceed, expectations. So it's hard to believe, looking at these numbers, that the RBA could hold again next month. And I do think, in time we may see them having to sort of step on the brake again after a sort of one-off pause.
It's interesting that the timing of some comments by one of the RBA board members, Ian Harper, who said, with the benefit of hindsight, it looks like we did a terrible job, excessively cautious in how we set interest rates. There'd be a lot of people that agree with him, but very frank from one of the RBA board members there, Stephen.
Yeah, so they sort of pointed to two issues. It was a very revealing comment, and it's very good to see. Everyone points to the governor, as the person who makes all the decisions, but ultimately the decisions are made by the board. And so it's good to see, a rare instance of a board member speaking out about their performance. Now, the two comments made, one was about the decision to keep interest rates very low through the pandemic, and the other was, communication. And I think, you look around the world at every central bank, more or less they all did the same thing. And more or less, every country is going through an inflationary episode. So to be honest, it's very hard to blame the Reserve Bank for that, right? I mean, we were facing really an unprecedented kind of crisis, and it made sense to kind of throw everything at it. What if things had turned out far worse and we hadn't done that? What I think is more objectionable is the communication side. So I think that this silly sort of pegging the guidance of interest rates to a date and having a whole lot of people see that as a kind of promise, that was something other countries didn't do. And I think the RBA is right to point out that as a big failing, and it's something I'd like to see sort of fully fleshed out in the upcoming review.
The US Consumer Price Index, it's come in at 5%. It's the lowest in a couple of years. Any encouragement out of that, Stephen?
So a lot of the kind of, short-term factors are declining. So, you see a big run up in energy prices, a lot of that's coming back. But the core inflation level is still actually very high. And we see things like services inflation still remaining very strong. And that sort of suggests that this, one-off spike in kind of supply constrained energy shock, Ukraine war, et cetera, has fully, converted now into a more traditional kind of inflationary episode. And despite interest rates in the US rising even further than in Australia, they're about 1.5 percentage points above where they are in Australia, still inflation is remaining stubbornly high. It's just not coming down as fast as you would imagine given the interest rate increases. So it suggests that the US Fed is going to have to lean harder on those interest rates going forward to kind of keep pulling that inflation rate down. And I think it signals a warning for Australia, right? Everyone says, oh, inflation peaked in December. We lift our foot off the brake, everything's fine, no need to do any more here. I think looking at the US, looking at other countries, that shows that that's not how it works, right? Inflation peaking isn't the end of the story. What we need inflation to be falling for many months before we can be confident that we've got it under control.
Treasurer Chalmers in Washington, D.C. at the moment, he's citing this IMF outlook, the worst outlook in 30 years. Do you accept that is where we're at right now? I ask you that in the context of the recent decade. We've had the GFC, we've had the COVID downturn. Is it all going to be worse than that?
Look, the Treasurer is doing his usual pre-budget expectations management, as any good Treasurer does, right? So he's softening us up for a tough budget where they don't spend a lot of money, which is good, and that's the right thing, frankly. So I look forward to seeing that. I think the IMF has a pretty pessimistic outlook, though, none of us economists have a crystal ball. No one can be sure exactly what's going to happen. The thing that I would sort of emphasize is this is really not different to COVID. This is just the sort of hangover from that COVID sort of shock, right? And that we did an incredible job as a country and as a world protecting economic capacity, protecting people's livelihoods. There was a huge reduction in economic output across the world in that time, and very few people felt the economic impact of that. That is an extraordinary achievement, but it comes at a cost, right? We can't have that kind of support and not expect to pay the bill. And that's what's happening now. So this big inflationary impulse, the need to raise interest rates to contain economic activity, that is the bill from the COVID protections coming due. It's not going to be a long period of paying that bill, but it's going to be pricey, and it's going to be around for a little while. In a few years, we'll be, it'll be long in the rearview mirror, but between now and then, things are going to be pretty rocky.
Professor Stephen Hamilton from George Washington University, thanks for joining me from Washington. Appreciate it.
Cheers, Kieran.